Dust swirls across the New Mexico desert under a blazing sun that turns the Sandia foothills into a furnace of stone and shadow. In the flickering lantern glow of an abandoned silver mine, a red-coated German shepherd named Blaze plants himself between his cowboy master and the hidden vault door that should have stayed sealed forever. The stone floor echoes with a hollow thud. A rusted iron ring glints like a warning, and a single golden Aztec idol catches the light, priceless, ancient, and deadly to anyone who claims it. Behind a stranger's black suit and polite smile waits a ruthless plan to seize the buried treasure and bury the lone cowboy who discovered it. One old leather journal on the crate is more than forgotten words. Inside its faded pages, a final warning will become the proof that turns a wandering cowboy's fortune into a desperate fight for survival. And when Blaze growls and charges, the mine will shift from silent refuge to battlefield, from hidden riches to a living miracle of loyalty and redemption. What happens next will make you believe that even in the harshest frontier, the Lord still hides second chances and sends a faithful dog to lead us to them. Before we begin, tell me right now, where are you watching from? Drop your country in the comments below. If you believe no cowboy, no loyal dog, and no lost soul should ever ride the trail alone, hit subscribe now and share this story with someone who needs hope today. The summer sun of 1885 hung like a molten coin in the relentless blue sky over Albuquerque, New Mexico, baking the earth until the air shimmered with heat, and the ground cracked like old leather under the weight of endless drought. Dust devils danced across the wide, rutted streets of the town, whipping fine sand into the eyes of passers-by, and coating everything in a gritty red haze. Adobe buildings lined the main drag, their thick walls offering scant relief from the furnace outside, while the distant Sandia Mountains rose sharp and unforgiving, their peaks mocking the parched valley below, with hints of cooler shadows. The scent of dry sagebrush mingled with horse manure and the sharp tang of whiskey spilling from saloon doors, a reminder that this was still the wild frontier, where fortunes were chased in silver mines and lost just as quickly to bandits, bad luck, or the merciless desert itself. Winds howled through the canyons at night, carrying echoes of coyote cries and the ghosts of failed dreams, turning the land into a place that tested a man's soul as much as his body. Into this harsh world rode Colt Remington, cutting a dashing figure that turned heads, even in a town accustomed to rugged men. He was a cowboy in his prime, early 30s, with a tall, athletic frame, honed by years of hard riding and roping wild cattle across the vast plains of Texas and Arizona. Broad shoulders filled out his faded blue shirt, tucked neatly into leather chaps that bore the scars of countless trails, and his movements were fluid, confident, the easy grace of a man who lived in the saddle. His face was strikingly handsome, with sharp features, a strong jaw dusted with dark stubble, and piercing brown eyes that sparkled with a roguish charm, often accompanied by a disarming smile that had won him more than a few admiring glances from saloon girls and ranchers' daughters alike. Long, wavy black hair peeked from under his wide-brimmed Stetson, tilted just so, and twin Colt peacemakers hung low on his hips, their handles worn smooth from practiced draws. Colt was known as a charmer, quick with a witty quip or a flirtatious wink, the kind of man who could diffuse a tense card game with laughter or settle a dispute with a steady gaze. Yet beneath that charismatic exterior lay a deeper solitude. A devastating sandstorm had stripped him of his herd and his ties to the land, leaving him wandering the trails with a restless heart, seeking something he couldn't quite name. At his side trotted Blaze, his loyal sheepdog mix, a sturdy beast with a coat of fiery red fur that gleamed like embers in the harsh sunlight. Blaze was no ordinary dog. Rescued as a pup from a brutal trapper years ago, he had grown into a fiercely intelligent companion, with sharp ears, always alert, and eyes that seemed to understand every word Colt spoke. His build was powerful, muscles rippling under his scarred hide, and his devotion was absolute. He shadowed Colt like a guardian spirit, ready to herd stray cattle or warn of rattlesnakes with a low growl. Together, they were an inseparable pair, man and dog against the wild. Colt guided his sleek black stallion, Shadow, a horse as dark and swift as its name, toward the edge of town where the buildings gave way to open desert. He had spent the morning in the Desert Rose Saloon, nursing a whiskey amid the haze of cigar smoke and tall tales from miners and drifters. The barkeep, Hank, a stocky fellow with a wild mustache and eyes squinted from years staring into the sun, had slid him a newspaper with a knowing grunt. "Looking for work, stranger? Or just chasing ghosts?" Hank's voice was gravelly, his demeanor gruff but fair, the kind of man who poured drinks and listened to troubles without judgment. Colt had scanned the classifieds, his mind wandering to memories of lively nights in border towns, dancing with spirited women under lantern light, outdrawing cheats in smoky poker games, the thrill of the open range. But those days felt distant now, hollow after the storm that buried his dreams. Then the ad caught his eye. Old silver mine from the wild days, 815 acres, sold as is. A forsaken claim near the Sandia foothills, abandoned since the bust of the early 80s. It promised isolation, a chance to stake his own ground away from the world's noise and fleeting charms. With his last earnings from herding jobs and lucky hands at faro tables totaling exactly 800, Colt felt a pull, a whisper of new beginnings in the wild. He mounted up, Blaze leaping eagerly beside Shadow, and they set out northeast, the sun pounding down like a hammer on an anvil. The trail wound through scrubland dotted with prickly pear and mesquite, the air thick with the buzz of insects and the distant cry of a hawk. Heat waves distorted the horizon, and dust coated Colt's bandana as he pulled it over his nose. He rode with relaxed vigilance, one hand on the reins, the other near his holster, scanning for signs of trouble. Bandits or claim jumpers were never far in these parts. Blaze ranged ahead, nose to the ground, occasionally darting after a lizard or pausing to sniff the wind. Memories surfaced as the miles passed. The laughter of old trail partners around campfires, the sting of lost loves who couldn't handle a cowboy's wandering ways, the raw freedom of chasing wild mustangs under starlit skies. But solitude suited him now, a quiet companion matching the vast emptiness. "What do you think, Blaze? A place of our own?" Colt murmured, his voice smooth and teasing. The dog barked once, tail wagging furiously, as if sealing the pact. As the sun dipped lower, casting golden light across the rugged foothills, the terrain grew steeper, pines beginning to dot the landscape and offering fleeting shade. The air cooled slightly, carrying the earthy scent of rock and resin. A faint trail led to a weathered marker half swallowed by sand. "Thorn mine, keep out." Colt dismounted, his boots crunching, on gravel and surveyed the site. The entrance gaped like a dark wound in the mountain face, boarded with rotting planks sagging under neglect. Rusted tools lay scattered, picks, shovels, a broken wheelbarrow, as if the miners had vanished mid-shift. Blaze sniffed excitedly at the edges, his red coat flashing as he pawed the ground. Colt looped his lasso around a loose board and yanked, the wood splintering with a sharp crack that echoed through the canyon. A rush of cool, musty air escaped, carrying the faint metallic tang of old silver and forgotten time. Dust swirled in the fading light, revealing a tunnel braced by ancient timbers, descending into shadow. "This here's our claim now, partners," Colt said with a grin, tipping his hat to the mountains. Blaze barked in agreement, venturing a few steps inside, his silhouette bold against the gloom. For the first time since the storm, Colt felt a surge of purpose, a new frontier, wild and waiting. The morning sun crept over the Sandia peaks like a cautious thief, spilling pale gold light across the rugged foothills and chasing away the night's lingering chill. The air was crisp now, carrying the sharp bite of pine resin and the faint metallic whisper of stone that had baked under yesterday's blaze. Dust settled slowly in the clearing outside the Thorn Mine, where Colt Remington had made his first real camp since claiming the forsaken property. The entrance yawned before him, a dark rectangle framed by splintered boards he had pried away the evening before, its depths exhaling cool, musty breath that smelled of long-forgotten labor and secrets buried deep. Scattered tools lay half-covered in sand, rusted picks with splintered handles, a cracked lantern, remnants of men who had chased silver veins until the mountain gave them nothing but silence. Colt stood at the threshold, his tall frame silhouetted against the rising light. Stetson pushed back on his dark, wavy hair as he surveyed his new domain with those piercing brown eyes that missed little. He wore the same faded blue shirt from the ride in, sleeves rolled to his elbows, revealing forearms corded with muscle and marked by old rope burns, a testament to years wrangling wild stock under merciless skies. His leather chaps creaked softly as he shifted weight, and the twin peacemakers at his hips caught the sun in dull glints. Silent guardians of a man who trusted charm, first but steel when words failed. That roguish smile played at the corners of his mouth, the one that had disarmed many a tense saloon standoff or won a dance with a pretty stranger. Yet this morning it held a quieter edge, satisfaction mixed with the wary caution of a cowboy staking fresh ground. Solitude had become his companion, but here, in this isolated claim, it felt like possibility rather than loss. Blaze padded restlessly at his heels, the red-coated sheepdog's ears pricked forward as he sniffed the cool air flowing from the mine. The dog's powerful build tensed with curiosity. Scars on his hide, faint reminders of past battles, with coyotes and traps, but his eyes, sharp, intelligent, held unwavering loyalty as they flicked between Colt and the dark opening. He let out a low whine, tail wagging once, eager to explore what his master had claimed. Shadow, the sleek black stallion, grazed nearby on sparse tufts of grass, his coat gleaming like polished onyx, occasionally lifting his head to snort at the unfamiliar surroundings. Colt's first order of business was the deed, and that meant a ride back to town. He saddled Shadow with practiced efficiency, checking cinches and bit before swinging up with fluid grace. Blaze leaped into stride beside them as they descended the trail toward Edgewood, a small settlement nestled in the valley where law and commerce clung to the edge of wilderness. The journey took the better part of the morning, the sun climbing higher and turning the air thick again, dust rising and small clouds behind hooves and paws. Colt's mind wandered to the mine's promise, a place to rebuild, perhaps even strike a vein that could restore what the sandstorm had stolen. Yet beneath the optimism lurked caution. Abandoned claims often hid more than silver, and rumors clung to old shafts like cobwebs. Edgewood's main street was a modest affair, lined with false front buildings bleached by sun and wind, a general store, livery stable, and a small law office squeezed between a barber shop and assay office. Colt tied Shadow to the hitching rail outside the latter, a squat adobe structure with a hand-painted sign reading, Voss Legal Services, Deeds, Claims, Wills. Blaze settled in the shade beneath the boardwalk, ever watchful, while Colt pushed through the door, spurs jingling softly on the wooden threshold. Inside, the office was cool and dimly lit, shelves lined with leather-bound ledgers and rolled maps yellowed with age. Behind a broad oak desk sat Clara Voss, the attorney whose name appeared on the mine's listing. She was a woman in her mid-40s, sturdy and capable-looking, with sharp features softened by laugh lines around her eyes and a thick braid of auburn hair pinned neatly at her nape. Her dress was practical gray wool, sleeves pushed up as she worked over papers, and her gaze, clear blue and direct, lifted to meet Colt's with the frank appraisal of someone who had seen every type of frontier dreamer pass through her door. Clara was known in Edgewood as fair but no nonsense, a widow who had taken over her late husband's practice and handled claims with an ironclad precision that brooked no foolishness. "Mornin', ma'am," Colt greeted, removing his Stetson and holding it against his chest, that charismatic smile flashing warm and genuine. "Colt Remington, I believe you've got papers waiting on the old Thorn mine up in the Sandias?" Clara's eyebrows rose slightly, a flicker of surprise crossing her capable face before she masked it with professional composure. She leaned back, folding her hands on the desk. "The Thorn place? Been sitting empty since Elias vanished back in '82. Most folks wouldn't touch it with a 10-foot pole, not with the stories floating around." Her voice was steady, laced with the dry pragmatism of mountain folk, but there was a hint of curiosity as she sized him up, noting the easy confidence and the guns at his hips. "You're serious about buying it outright?" "Dead serious, ma'am," Colt replied, his tone light but resolute, eyes meeting hers without flinching. "Cash on the barrelhead, 800, as advertised." Clara studied him a moment longer, then nodded, pulling a yellowed folder from a drawer. "All right, Mr. Remington. Title's clear. County records show no lien since Thorn disappeared, no utilities, no water rights beyond what's on the land, and the access trail washes out in heavy rain." She slid the papers across the desk, her expression softening just a touch. "Folks say it's haunted, you know. Miners hearing things down deep, shadows moving where they shouldn't. Elias went mad, they claim, talking to ghosts before he walked off one night and never came back." Colt chuckled low, a rich sound that filled the small office. "Ghosts and I have an understanding, Miss Voss. They mind their business, I mind mine." He leaned forward to sign, his movements deliberate, charm turning the transaction into something almost pleasant. Clara couldn't help a small smile in return. Few men faced the Thorn legend with such nonchalance. Papers signed and cash exchanged, crisp bills counted twice, Colt stepped back into the blinding midday light, deed folded safely in his shirt pocket. He paused at the general store next door, stocking up on essentials: coal oil for lamps, a new pick head, canned beans, coffee, jerky, and cartridges. The storekeeper, a wiry old-timer with spectacles and a perpetual chew of tobacco, eyed him curiously, but asked no questions beyond the weather. By late afternoon, Colt rode back up the trail, Blaze ranging ahead, packs heavy on Shadow's saddle. The mine waited as he had left it, the entrance a silent invitation. He spent the remaining daylight securing the site, reinforcing loose boards at the mouth for safety, clearing debris from the first chamber, and setting up a small camp inside where the air stayed cooler. A portable generator he'd bartered for in town hummed to life, its yellow glow pushing back the gloom to reveal rough-hewn walls veined with quartz and shadowed tunnels branching deeper. As dusk fell, painting the mountains in bruised purples and oranges, Colt sat on an overturned crate near the entrance, brewing coffee over a small fire while Blaze gnawed contentedly on a strip of jerky. The wind picked up, moaning through the pines like a distant lament, and the isolation wrapped around them, comforting, vast, unbroken. Yet, as full night descended, stars pricking the velvet sky, Blaze suddenly stiffened. His ears flattened, a low growl rumbling in his chest as he stared toward the farthest wall of the main chamber, where shadows pooled thickest. Colt's hand drifted instinctively toward a peacemaker, his charming smile fading into watchful alertness. He rose slowly, lantern in hand, and approached the spot Blaze fixated on. The beam revealed nothing but solid rock. Yet when he tapped it with his boot, a hollow echo answered back, faint but unmistakable, like a breath held deep within the mountain. "Something buried here, boy?" Colt murmured, his voice low in the stillness. Blaze pawed at the stone, whining urgently. Colt felt a prickle along his spine, not fear, but the thrill of mystery. Whatever secrets Elias Thorne had left behind, they were stirring now. Dawn broke over the Sandia foothills with a clarity that made the world feel newly forged. The sky, a vast expanse of pale blue, washed clean by the night's cool breath. Sunlight slanted through the pines, casting long golden spears across the mine's clearing and glinting off dew-kissed rocks, while the air carried the sharp tang of resin and earth, stirred by morning wind. The desert's heat had not yet reclaimed the day, leaving a brief, precious window of comfort before the sun climbed to its punishing height. Birds called from the branches, jays and sparrows flitting like shadows, and far below, the faint haze of Albuquerque shimmered on the horizon, a distant reminder of civilization Colt Remington had chosen to leave behind. Inside the main chamber of the Thorn mine, Colt stirred from his bedroll on the hard stone floor, the portable generator's low hum a steady companion in the gloom. He rose with the fluid motion of a man accustomed to rough camps, stretching his tall frame and running a hand through his dark, wavy hair, now tousled from sleep. The faded blue shirt clung slightly from the night's damp chill, and his leather chaps lay folded nearby, ready for the day's work. Those piercing brown eyes, sharp even in the lantern light, scanned the space with habitual vigilance, while that roguish smile tugged at his lips as he spotted Blaze already awake and alert. The red-coated sheepdog sat patiently near the suspicious wall from the night before, ears pricked forward, his powerful body tense with anticipation, as if the hollow echo they had heard still lingered in his keen senses. "Mornin', partner," Colt murmured, his voice smooth and warm as he scratched behind Blaze's ears, earning a satisfied thump of the tail against the stone. "Still frettin' over that wall, are ya? Reckon we'll get to the bottom of it today." He brewed coffee over a small spirit stove, the rich aroma filling the chamber and chasing away the musty staleness, then shared jerky with Blaze while planning the exploration. The mine called to him, not just as shelter, but as a puzzle, its depths promising answers to the restlessness that had driven him here. First light fully in the clearing, Colt set to practical tasks, tethering Shadow more securely near a patch of scrub grass, reinforcing the entrance timbers with fresh nails driven by a borrowed hammer, and clearing fallen rock from the main tunnel. Sweat beaded on his brow despite the morning cool, his muscles working in rhythmic efficiency, the sun climbing and turning the air warmer with each passing hour. Dust motes danced in the shafts of light, piercing the entrance, and the mountains seemed to breathe around him, stone walls cool and unyielding under his touch. Deeper in, he discovered forgotten relics of the old crew, wooden crates cracked with age, containing rusted tools, empty powder kegs, and a folded cot that he claimed for better comfort. Among the debris, tucked in a niche behind a collapsed support beam, lay a leather-bound journal, its cover cracked and darkened by time, the name Elias Thorne embossed in faded gold on the corner. Colt's curiosity flared. He sat on a nearby crate, lantern casting flickering shadows, and opened it carefully, pages brittle under his fingers. The early entries were methodical, dates from 1880 onward, notes on vein assays, timber orders, crew wages, the practical records of a determined prospector chasing silver through stubborn rock. Elias Thorne, from what Colt gleaned, had been a solitary man even then, an engineer by training with precise handwriting that grew more hurried over time. But as pages turned, the tone shifted. Entries spoke of visitors in dark suits from back east, arriving under cover of night with sealed crates too heavy for mere tools. Not silver thereafter, one passage read, but something the government wants hidden from prying eyes and bandit hands. Gold bars, they whispered, enough to fund a secret reserve if the banks fail again. Colt's brow furrowed, that charismatic grin fading into focused interest. Further on, Elias wrote of strange sounds echoing from deeper shafts, low vibrations like distant thunder, or the mountain breathing when it shouldn't. He described sealing a lower chamber on orders from those suited men, welding it shut after they departed, leaving him alone with instructions to guard and stay silent. The final pages grew erratic, ink blotched as if written by trembling hand, warnings of greed in the visitor's eyes, suspicions they intended the cash forgotten forever, and haunting references to ringing from below like something alive and waiting. Blaze whined softly, nosing Colt's boot as if urging him back to the hollow wall. Colt closed the journal, a thrill coursing through him. The same rush as spotting a wild herd on the horizon. Old Elias heard something, didn't he, boy? And you hear it too. He tapped to the wall again, the hollow thud echoing clearer in daylight, promising a hidden space beyond the stone facade. The mystery gnawed at him, but practical needs called. Midday heat now fierce outside, Colt saddled Shadow for a ride into Edgewood, supplies running low, and curiosity driving him to seek local tales about Thorne. Blaze ranged alongside as they descended the trail, wind whipping dust into small eddies, the dog's red coat a vivid streak against the arid landscape. In town, the streets baked under the sun, boardwalks creaking under boot heels and wagon wheels rumbling past. Colt hitched Shadow outside the saloon, drawing a few nods from locals who remembered his charm from the previous day. Inside, the air was cooler, thick with tobacco and the murmur of conversation. He ordered whiskey, leaning on the scarred bar as Hank, the grizzled barkeep with his wild mustache and squinted eyes, poured with a grunt. "Back so soon, Cowboy?" Hank asked, his gruff voice laced with dry humor. "That old thorn hole ain't swallowed you yet?" Colt flashed his disarming smile. "Not yet, but it's tryin'. What tales you got on Elias Thorne? Folks say he went loco before vanishin'." Hank leaned closer, wiping a glass. Decent sort at first, quiet, paid his tab. But after those government types showed up, he changed. Boarded windows, bought extra locks. Talked about hidden gold, tunnels linking to other claims. Most figured the mountain broke him. Colt nodded thoughtfully, then stepped out into the glare, heading to the marshal's office, a small frame building with a star painted on the door. Inside sat Marshal Wade Colton, a burly man in his 40s with a thick beard framing a weathered face, his badge gleaming on a vested chest. Wade was a former cowboy turned lawman, broad and solid as oak, with steady gray eyes that had seen range wars and saloon brawls alike. Fair-minded, but tough as rawhide when needed. "Afternoon, Marshal," Colt greeted, hat in hand. "Colt Remington. Just claimed the old Thorn mine up the hill." Wade looked up from paperwork, appraising Colt with a slow nod. "Heard someone finally took it. Wade Colton. That place has stories, rumors of secret tunnels to lost Spanish gold, claim jumpers poking around recent-like. Keep your eyes open. Dessert attracts all kinds." They talked a while, Wade sharing coffee and cautionary tales of poachers and drifters. Colt listened, charmed drawing out details without pressing too hard. "Any truth to Thorne hearing things down deep?" Wade shrugged. "Mountain plays tricks, wind in shafts, settle in rock, or maybe something more. Elias swore he heard breathing from sealed parts. Walked off one night, leaving everything. Some say greed drove him mad." Ride back to the mine as shadows lengthened. Colt's mind turned over the journal's secrets and the town's whispers. Blaze loped ahead, pausing occasionally to glance back, as if sharing the intrigue. Dusk settled purple over the peaks when they arrived, the entrance a dark invitation once more. Colt lit lanterns, journal in hand, and returned to the hollow wall. Blaze pawed insistently, a low growl vibrating in his throat. Tapping again, Colt traced faint seams in the stone, almost invisible, like a forgotten door. The echo rang deeper now, a promise of what lay sealed since Elias's day. "Whatever's down there, boy," Colt said softly, his voice steady with excitement. "It's been waiting a long time. Reckon tomorrow we find out." Night fell, stars blazing cold overhead, the mountains silent but watchful. Inside, man and dog settled near the fire's glow, the journal's warnings lingering like smoke in the air. Night had settled over the thorn mine like a heavy velvet curtain, the stars above the Sandia peaks burning cold and bright in a sky unmarred by cloud or moon. A dry wind moaned through the pines, carrying the lonely cry of a distant coyote and the faint rustle of sagebrush against rock, while the temperature dropped sharply, turning the air crisp enough to bite at exposed skin. Inside the main chamber, the glow of Colt Remington's lanterns cast warm, flickering pools of light across the rough-hewn walls, pushing back the mountain's darkness, but not its silence. The generator hummed steadily in the corner, a modern intrusion into this relic of the old frontier, powering a single bulb that swung gently from a timber overhead and threw long, dancing shadows into the deeper tunnels. Colt sat on his bedroll near the fire ring he had fashioned from loose stones, the leather-bound journal of Elias Thorne open on his knee. The flames crackled softly, sending sparks upward to die against the soot-blackened ceiling, while the rich scent of burning pine mingled with coffee steaming in a tin cup at his side. He wore his shirt unbuttoned at the collar, sleeves rolled high, revealing the lean, rope-hard muscles of his forearms as he turned another brittle page. Those piercing brown eyes, usually sparkling with roguish humor, were narrowed now in deep concentration, the firelight catching the sharp angles of his handsome face and the shadow of stubble along his strong jaw. The charismatic smile that had charmed saloon girls and disarmed wary strangers was absent tonight, replaced by a quiet intensity that spoke of a man weighing secrets heavier than silver. Blaze lay beside him, the big red sheepdog's head resting on powerful paws, but his ears remained half-cocked, and his dark eyes fixed unblinkingly on the far wall, the one that had returned a hollow thud since their first night. Every so often a low rumble stirred in his chest, not quite a growl, but a warning all the same, as though the mountain itself whispered threats only he could hear. Colt reached down absent-mindedly, running calloused fingers through the dog's thick coat. "You ain't letting this go, are you, boy?" he murmured, voice low and smooth as aged whiskey. "Reckon old Elias didn't either." The journal's later entries had grown fevered, describing a hidden lower chamber, sealed on orders from men in dark suits, who arrived by moonlight, with wagons too heavy for mere supplies. Elias wrote of priceless artifacts, golden Aztec idols taken from Spanish conquistadors, intricate jewelry plundered from colonial missions, ancient pottery and carved jade from lost native tribes, crated and lowered into the depths as a secret federal cache, meant to be preserved against the chaos of bank panics and frontier lawlessness. Not for war or greed, Elias had scrawled, but to safeguard what history deemed too valuable to lose. Yet their eyes gleamed with the same hunger as any bandit. The final pages spoke of a door welded shut, accessible only by a hidden mechanism, and of strange vibrations rising from below, like the mountain breathing slow, waiting for someone fool enough to wake it. Colt closed the journal, exhaling slowly. The thrill of discovery coursed through him, the same electric pull he'd felt spotting a wild Mustang herd or drawing on a cheat across a poker table. But caution tempered it. Secrets this old rarely stayed buried without reason. The third night in the mine brought the sound again, clearer now, a deep, resonant thrum that seemed to rise through the stone floor like a distant heartbeat. Blaze surged to his feet with a sharp bark, hackles rising along his scarred back as he lunged toward the suspicious wall, paws scrabbling frantically at the rock. Colt was up in an instant, lantern in one hand, peacemaker drawn in the other, his movement swift and silent as a mountain lion. The lantern's beam swept the wall, revealing nothing but dust and shadow, until he stepped closer and saw the faint outline, hairline seams forming a rough rectangle, cleverly mortared to blend with the natural stone. "Well, I'll be damned," he whispered, holstering the gun and running fingers along the edges. The rock here was colder than the rest, and when he pressed his ear to it, the vibration hummed faintly against his skin. Blaze whined urgently, nosing a lower corner where a small iron ring lay half hidden beneath decades of grit. Colt brushed it clean, heart quickening. The ring was attached to a recessed panel, rusted but intact. He gripped it, muscles bunching under his shirt as he pulled. At first nothing, then a grinding protest of stone on stone, and the panel swung inward on concealed hinges, revealing a narrow shaft descending into blackness. Cool, stale air rushed up, carrying the dry scent of earth long undisturbed, and a faint metallic tang that raised the hairs on Colt's neck. Wooden rungs, surprisingly solid despite their age, formed a ladder disappearing into the dark. Blaze pressed close, a low growl vibrating against Colt's leg, but the dog's tail gave a single uncertain wag, loyalty overriding instinct. Colt knelt, meeting those intelligent eyes. "Stay here and guard the top, partner. I'll holler if I need you." Blaze whined in protest but obeyed, settling at the edge with ears pricked forward. Lantern raised high, Colt descended carefully, boots testing each rung before committing weight. The shaft was tight, walls brushing his shoulders, the air growing cooler and thicker with every step. 15 feet down, maybe 20, his boots touched solid rock, and the lantern revealed a low-ceilinged chamber, perhaps 20 feet square, its walls reinforced with iron plates long gone to rust. In the center stood a heavy iron door, round like a bank vault, its surface etched with faint markings and a combination wheel lock crusted in verdigris. Colt's breath fogged in the sudden chill. Near the wheel, barely legible through oxidation, was a date, 15/7/1885, the very day Elias's final journal entry broke off mid-sentence. Colt's pulse hammered. He set the lantern down, gloved fingers tracing the numbers, then gripped the wheel and turned it slowly to match the date. Resistance at first, then a deep, reluctant clunk as tumblers fell into place. A hiss of trapped air escaped, sharp with the scent of old oil and something sweeter, aged cedar from packing crates. The door swung inward on protesting hinges, revealing a smaller room lit faintly by Colt's lantern spilling through. His breath caught. Stacked neatly against the walls were wooden crates, dozens of them, stenciled with faded federal markings. U.S. Treasury, restricted. The air here was cleaner, preserved by the seal, carrying the unmistakable gleam of gold in the lantern's glow. Colt stepped inside, boots echoing softly. He pried open the nearest crate with his knife, wood splintering dryly after decades. Inside, nestled in brittle cloth, lay a golden Aztec idol, serpent-headed, emerald eyes glinting even in the dim light, its surface worked with exquisite detail. Beneath it, layers of colonial Spanish jewelry, heavy necklaces of worked gold, rings set with rubies and pearls, and intricately carved jade pendants from ancient tribes. Another crate revealed pottery sealed in wax paper, delicate vessels painted with scenes of forgotten rituals. The value was staggering, not just in metal, but in history itself, artifacts that museums back east would kill to possess. A folded letter lay atop one stack, paper yellowed but intact, written in Elias Thorne's precise hand. "If you read this, I am gone." They said it was for the nation's heritage, but I saw greed in their eyes. These treasures were never meant for light again, hidden to be forgotten by all but the men who buried them. Do not trust any who come in suits claiming authority. They are the same who sealed this place, and they will silence anyone who disturbs it. Colt folded the letter carefully, slipping it into his shirt pocket over his heart. The weight of discovery settled on him, not triumph, but a wary awe. He closed the crate, lantern light catching the gold one last time, then backed out and pulled the vault door shut behind him. The wheel spun with a final clunk, sealing the chamber once more. Ascending the ladder, he emerged to find Blaze waiting anxiously, tail thumping hard against the stone, the moment Colt's head appeared. Colt knelt, burying his face in the dog's thick ruff. "We're rich beyond reckoning, boy," he whispered, voice rough with emotion. "But we just stirred up a hornet's nest, older than both of us." Outside, the wind howled louder through the pines, as though the mountain itself protested the disturbance. Colt secured the hidden panel, lantern dimmed low, and sat by the fire with Blaze pressed close. Sleep came, fitfully that night, dreams haunted by golden serpents and shadowed men in dark suits riding out of the desert dark. Morning would bring decisions, and he suspected visitors. 3 days had passed since Colt Remington had sealed the hidden vault and climbed back into the light. 3 days of uneasy quiet in the thorn mine that felt more like the calm before a desert storm. The sun rose fierce each morning, turning the Sandia foothills into a furnace of shimmering heat, the air thick with the dry scent of sage and baked stone, while afternoons brought gusts that whipped dust into swirling devils across the clearing. Nights cooled sharply, stars blazing overhead like diamonds scattered on black velvet, the wind moaning through pines with a voice that seemed to carry Elias Thorne's warnings from the grave. The mountain held its secrets close, but Colt felt them stirring, a prickle along his spine that no amount of frontier experience could fully shake. He kept busy with practical work, reinforcing timbers deeper in the main tunnel, hauling fresh water from a distant spring on Shadow's strong back, and scouting the surrounding ridges on foot, with Blaze ever at his side. The big red sheepdog seemed restless too, his powerful frame alert, ears swiveling at every rustle of brush or distant rockfall. Colt's tall, athletic build moved with easy efficiency through the tasks, his faded blue shirt darkened with sweat, leather chaps creaking softly, and those twin peacemakers a constant weight at his hips. His handsome face, shadowed by the wide brim of his Stetson, bore a thoughtful expression now, the roguish smile rarer as he weighed the vault's treasures against the letter's grim caution. Gold and artifacts beyond dreaming lay below, enough to buy a ranch 10 times over or fund a life of ease in some bustling city. But Elias's words echoed, greed in the eyes of men who buried it to be forgotten. On the third afternoon, as the sun dipped toward the western peaks and painted the rocks in fiery orange, Colt rode down to a nearby arroyo to check a snare he'd set for rabbit. Blaze ranged ahead, nose to the ground, when suddenly the dog froze, hackles rising along his scarred back. A low, menacing growl rumbled from his chest as he stared toward the trail leading up from the valley. Colt reined Shadow in, hand drifting instinctively to a peacemaker, his piercing brown eyes narrowing against the glare. A lone rider emerged from the heat haze, approaching at a deliberate pace on a well-groomed bay horse. The man was tall and gaunt, perhaps in his 50s, dressed in a severe black wool suit that seemed out of place in the rugged wild. Tailored coat buttoned high, vest and tie crisp despite the dust. A narrow-brimmed hat shading a thin face with sharp angular features and cold gray eyes that missed nothing. His posture was erect, almost military, with gloved hands holding the reins lightly, and a leather satchel slung across the pommel. He carried no visible gun belt, but something in his measured approach spoke of quiet authority and danger. This was no drifting cowboy or prospector. He moved like a man accustomed to being obeyed, his expression calm but probing, the kind who weighed words and men alike before speaking. Colt waited, thumb resting casually near his holster, that charismatic smile fixed in place but not reaching his eyes. Blaze pressed close to Shadow's legs, growl deepening. The rider drew up 20 paces away, tipping his hat politely. "Afternoon, sir," he called, voice smooth and clipped, with an Eastern inflection. "Victor Lang with the Federal Heritage Preservation Office. I believe you've recently acquired the Old Thorn claim?" Colt's mind raced. Federal office? Out here? He kept his tone easy, drawl warm. "That's right. Colt Remington. What brings a government man to my doorstep?" Lang's gray eyes flicked over the mine entrance, then to Blaze's bristling form, a faint smile touching his thin lips but not warming them. "We're cataloging historic sites from the Silver Rush era, artifacts, records, anything of cultural value. Elias Thorne's workings were flagged for potential significance. Mind if I ask, found anything unusual down there? Old documents, perhaps, or sealed storage?" Blaze's growl turned sharper, the dog's powerful body coiling as if ready to spring. Colt rested a calming hand on the saddle horn, though his own instincts prickled. "Just dust and rusted picks, Mr. Lang. Place has been empty a long spell." Lang nodded slowly, reaching into his coat for a calling card, plain white stock with elegant printing and a single telephone exchange scrawled below. "Fair enough, but if something does turn up, artifacts of historical import, they belong to the people, not private hands. We'd compensate fairly, of course." His gaze lingered on Colt, assessing. "Fine animal you've got there. Loyal, I wager. Sometimes too loyal." Colt pocketed the card without glancing at it. "Blaze takes care of his own. Safe travels back to town." Lang tipped his hat again, wheeling his horse with precise control, and rode away down the trail, dust rising in his wake. Colt watched until he vanished into the haze, then dismounted and examined the card closely. On the reverse, faint indentations appeared when held to the light, letters scratched lightly, "It ain't over." A chill unrelated to the evening breeze ran down his spine. Blaze nosed his hand, whining softly. That evening, as stars emerged and the wind picked up its mournful song, Colt sat by his fire with the journal and letter spread before him. Elias's warning rang truer now, men in suits, claiming authority, but driven by greed. Next morning broke clear and hot, the sun a hammer on the anvil of the desert. Colt rode into Edgewood for more supplies, but detoured past a small homestead on the outskirts, a weathered cabin where a young woman tended a modest garden. She was Lila Harlan, in her mid-20s, with sun-kissed freckles across a pretty face framed by honey-blonde hair tied back practically, her figure sturdy from ranch work in a simple calico dress. Lila was known locally as kind-hearted but independent, helping neighbors while running her late father's small spread alone, sharp-witted, with warm hazel eyes that lit up at Colt's approach. "Mornin', Lila," Colt greeted, tipping his Stetson with that disarming smile. "Heard any strangers poking around old claims?" She straightened, wiping hands on her apron, a flush touching her cheeks at his charm. "Matter of fact, yes. A tall fellow in a black suit, asking about Thorne's mine yesterday. Said he was government, but something off about him. Elias turned away similar types before he vanished, refused to sell or show him deeper shafts." Colt nodded gravely, sharing coffee on her porch, while Blaze chased grasshoppers in the yard. Lila's tale matched Lang's visit, deepening the unease. Back at the mine by dusk, Colt found fresh hoof prints near the entrance. Lang's bay, circling but not entering. Blaze growled at the tracks, nose twitching at a foreign scent. That night, as Colt bedded down with peacemakers close and Blaze on guard, strange sounds echoed from the ridges, distant rocks dislodged, perhaps, or footsteps too deliberate for animals. He rose silently, lantern low, and peered into the dark. Shadows moved beyond the clearing, fleeting but unmistakable. Blaze's ears flattened, a deep warning rumble in his throat as he stared toward the trail. Colt's hand closed on a gun grip, the mountain's breath feeling colder now. "They know, boy," he whispered, "and they're comin'." The fire burned low, casting long shadows across the stone, while outside the wind carried whispers of approaching trouble. The moon hung low over the Sandia Peaks that night, a thin silver sliver casting pale, ghostly light across the rugged foothills and turning the Thorne Mine's clearing into a landscape of sharp shadows and inky black. The wind had died to an uneasy whisper, rustling pines like distant murmurs, while the air carried a biting chill that seeped through clothing and stone alike. Stars wheeled overhead in indifferent splendor, but inside the mine's main chamber, tension coiled thick as smoke from a fresh-fired gun. The generator's hum seemed louder in the stillness, lanterns throwing wavering glows across the rough walls, where tools hung like silent sentinels and the hidden panel to the vault remained securely disguised. Colt Remington lay on his bedroll, eyes open in the dim light, one hand resting on the butt of a peacemaker. Sleep had evaded him since the strange sounds began. Faint scrapes outside, rocks shifting under deliberate weight, the occasional snort of a horse muffled by distance. His tall frame was tense beneath the blanket, muscles honed from years on the trail ready to explode into action. The faded blue shirt was unbuttoned at the collar, his Stetson hung on a nearby peg, dark wavy hair tousled against the saddle he used as a pillow. That handsome face, usually quick with a roguish smile, was set in grim lines now, piercing brown eyes scanning the entrance tunnel every few moments. Blaze provided the first true warning. The big red sheepdog had been dozing at Colt's feet, but suddenly his head snapped up, ears flattening, as a deep rumbling growl built in his powerful chest. Hackles rose along his scarred back, and he surged to his feet, body coiled like a spring, as he stared toward the mine's mouth. His intelligent eyes burned with alert fire, lips curling to reveal white fangs in the lantern glow. "Easy, boy," Colt whispered, already rising silently, both peacemakers drawn and cocked, with thumbs that moved like lightning. He killed the generator with a flick, plunging the chamber into deeper shadow, broken only by the low fire's embers, and moved to the wall beside the entrance, back pressed to cool stone. The attack came swift and brutal. A heavy boot crashed against the reinforced boarding. Colt had nailed across the outer mouth, wood splintering with a sharp crackness that echoed like a rifle shot through the tunnel. 3 figures burst in, silhouetted against the starlit clearing, rough men in dark coats and low-crowned hats, faces masked by bandanas, rifles and shotguns at the ready. They moved with practiced menace, not the clumsy rush of common claim jumpers, but the coordinated advance of hired guns, eyes gleaming with purpose in the faint light. Blaze launched first, a red blur of fury exploding from the shadows. He slammed into the lead intruder with bone-jarring force, jaws clamping on the man's arm in a vise of teeth and muscle. The intruder howled, shotgun clattering to the stone as he staggered back, firing wildly. Into the air, Colt fired in the same heartbeat, his peacemakers roaring thunder in the confined space. The first shot kicked up dust inches from the second man's boots, a warning that drove him diving for cover behind a crate. The third spun toward Colt, levering a rifle, but Colt's second barrel barked again, precise, controlled, shattering the lantern in the man's hand and plunging that side of the chamber into deeper dark. "Get back!" Colt shouted, voice steady and commanding, the drawl edged with steel. He advanced a step, guns leveled, as Blaze released his grip on the writhing first intruder and whirled to face the others, blood flecking his muzzle but his growl unbroken. The intruders hesitated, their prey fighting back fiercer than expected, the dog a demon in the gloom. One fired blindly, the muzzle flash illuminating grim faces as the bullet ricocheted off stone with a whining screech. Colt returned fire, his shot deliberate into the ceiling above the shooter, showering him with rock fragments and forcing retreat. Chaos reigned brief but fierce, shouts, barks, the acrid stink of powder smoke filling the tunnel, shadows leaping wildly in the fire's glow. Blaze lunged again, driving the second man back toward the entrance, while Colt covered with steady shots that pinned them without killing. Warnings from a man who knew the cost of blood. Then, from outside, a new sound cut through the din. The thunder of hooves on the trail, rapid and sure. Headlights no, lanterns swinging on a fast-moving horse. The intruders froze, exchanging panicked glances, before scrambling back into the night, dragging their wounded comrade as they fled into the pines. Colt held his fire, breathing hard, smoke curling from his gun barrels as he lowered them slowly. Blaze returned to his side, panting but triumphant, pressing close with a whine. The rider burst into the clearing moments later, reining a lathered horse to a skid. Marshal Wade Colton swung down, shotgun in hand, his burly frame solid in the starlight, thick beard framing a face etched with concern and readiness. The former cowboy turned lawman moved with authority, gray eyes scanning the scene as he approached the splintered entrance. "Remington," Wade called, voice booming. "You alive in there?" Colt stepped into view, guns holstered now, that roguish smile returning though edged with adrenaline. "Alive and kickin', Marshal. Thanks for the timely arrival." Wade examined the tracks and blood drops in the dust, his expression darkening. "Heard shots echo down the valley. Folks in Edgewood raised the alarm. 3 riders, heading south fast. Same crew been sniffing around old claims, I reckon." They shared coffee by the rebuilt fire as Colt recounted Lang's visit and the attack, careful to skirt the vault's details. Wade listened gravely, stroking his beard. "That Lang feller's no true federal man. Heard whispers of out-of-state sharps hunting lost caches. Thorne's mine always had tales of hidden loot. You poked a nest, son?" Colt nodded, scratching Blaze's ears as the dog leaned against him. "Reckon I did, but a man's got a right to defend his claim." Wade grunted agreement, eyes respectful. "You held 'em off good. Me and the boys will track 'em come dawn. But watch your back. These types don't quit easy." As the marshal rode off into the pre-dawn gray, Colt secured the entrance stronger than before, Blaze ever vigilant. The mountain loomed silent again, but the air felt charged now, war declared in the shadows. Dawn would bring pursuit, but for now, man and dog stood watch together, the bond between them forged stronger in the smoke of battle. Word of the shootout at the Thorne mine spread through Edgewood and the surrounding valleys like wildfire on dry prairie grass, carried on the tongues of riders, ranch hands, and merchants who gathered in saloons and stores to swap tales under the relentless sun. By week's end, newspapers in Albuquerque carried bold headlines. Dashing cowboy unearths lost frontier treasure, repels claim jumpers in daring defense. The stories painted Colt Remington as a hero of the old mold, a charming gunslinger who had struck riches in ancient artifacts and stood firm against desperados, his loyal dog at his side. Folks spoke of golden Aztec relics and Spanish jewels worth a king's ransom, though Colt had shared no details, letting rumor fill the gaps. Federal agents arrived soon after, stern men in suits who inspected the mine under Marshal Wade Colton's watchful eye, confirming the cache's historical value and negotiating a fair compensation, enough to secure the claim outright and fund improvements without stripping the treasures away. The money changed everything, yet nothing about Colt's core. He used it not for saloons or city finery, but to transform the forsaken shaft into something the frontier sorely needed. A refuge for the weary and downtrodden souls who scratched a living from the harsh land. He dubbed it the Frontier Sanctuary, a haven for drifting cowpokes with outspreads, miners broken by failed claims, settlers displaced by drought or Apache raids, and even wandering native folk pushed from ancestral grounds. The entrance, once a dark maw of danger, now bore a hand-carved sign swinging in the breeze. All wayfarers welcome, rest for man and beast. Colt threw himself into the work with the same fluid energy that had marked his trail days, his tall frame often stripped to the waist under the blazing sun, muscles gleaming with sweat as he hauled timber and stone. His faded blue shirt hung on a peg inside, replaced by practical suspenders and rolled sleeves, while his Stetson shaded those piercing brown eyes that now held a deeper purpose. The roguish smile returned fuller, flashing warm greetings to newcomers, his charismatic drawl putting fearful strangers at ease. Blaze romped through the clearing like a guardian spirit, his red coat vivid against the dust, ever alert but welcoming to those who meant no harm. The main chamber expanded into livable quarters, walls whitewashed with lime for brightness, wooden floors laid over stone, bunks and tables crafted from salvaged timber. Deeper tunnels became storerooms for provisions, sacks of flour, beans, coffee, and jerky, bought in bulk from Edgewood merchants eager to trade with the newfound hero. Colt planted a vegetable patch in the clearing, irrigating from a rediscovered spring, and built corrals for horses. The air soon filled with the contented whinny of weary mounts finding graze. A blacksmith forge rose near the entrance, its ring echoing as Colt shoed animals and mended, tools for those who couldn't pay. Marshal Wade Colton became a frequent visitor, riding up with supplies or news, his burly frame dismounting with a grunt and his bearded face splitting in a rare grin. "You've turned this hole into a proper outpost, Remington," he'd rumble, sharing whiskey by the evening fire, as they discussed frontier justice and the sanctuary's growing needs. Wade's steady presence lent legitimacy, warding off any lingering claim jumpers with the weight of his badge. The first to stay long-term was Silas Reed, a lanky young cowhand in his early 20s with sun-bleached hair, calloused hands, and a quiet demeanor born of hard luck. He'd lost his family's small spread to bankers after a brutal winter killed the herd, leaving him drifting with nothing but a worn saddle and a resolute jaw. Silas arrived dusty and downcast, leading a limping pony, but Colt's easy welcome and offer of work mending fences drew him in. "Plenty of room and honest labor here, partner," Colt said, clapping him on the shoulder. Silas proved a quick hand with tools and horses, his gratitude quiet but deep, soon becoming Colt's right hand in running the haven. Then came Nora Thorne, Elias's grandniece, a determined woman in her late 20s with ash-blonde hair braided practically, sharp green eyes carrying the weight of family loss, and a sturdy build from years helping on relatives' ranches. She'd ridden in from a distant claim, drawn by newspaper tales of the discovered artifacts and seeking closure for her kin's mysterious end. Nora was no fragile flower. She spoke plainly, with a frontier woman's resilience, her calico dress practical and her boots worn from long trails. Uncle Elias deserved better than vanishing into legend, she told Colt by the fire one evening, voice steady but laced with old sorrow. Colt shared the journal and letter, carefully edited, and led her to the sealed vault, now reinforced with fresh concrete for protection. She placed a hand on the cool stone, eyes misting briefly. He can rest easy now, knowing his secrets built something good. Nora stayed, her skills with needle and garden proving invaluable, organizing stores and tending the sick with herbal remedies passed down through family. More followed, weathered miners nursing injuries from cave-ins, families fleeing Apache troubles with wide-eyed children clinging to wagon sides, even a small band of Navajo seeking temporary shelter from reservation pressures. The sanctuary swelled with life, laughter around evening campfires, stories swapped under starlit skies. the ring of hammer on anvil, and the lowing of replenished stock. Colt moved among them like a natural leader, his charm drawing confessions and camaraderie, offering work to the able and rest to the weary. He invited Wade for supper often, the marshal's booming laugh mingling with Silas's quiet jokes and Nora's sharp wit. Blaze reveled in it all, herding children like stray calves or curling by the fire with elders, his red coat a familiar comfort. One crisp evening, as autumn tinged the pines with gold, the group gathered around a blazing fire pit outside the entrance, coffee brewing and venison roasting on spits. Silas strummed a battered guitar, Nora tended a pot of stew, children laughed, chasing fireflies, and Wade shared pipe tobacco with Colt. The sanctuary hummed with simple vitality, a beacon in the wild, born from buried treasures and one cowboy's resolve to give back. "You done good, Remington," Wade said quietly, gazing at the gathered faces. "Turned a cursed hole into hope for the downtrodden." Colt tipped his Stetson, smile warm in the firelight. "Ain't about the gold anymore, Marshal. It's about giving folks a fair shake." Blaze thumped his tail against the ground, head resting on Colt's boot, as laughter rose into the night. The mountain stood sentinel, no longer whispering threats but echoing with new life. Spring arrived late in the Sandia foothills that year, as if the harsh winter had clung stubbornly to the land before finally yielding to warmer winds from the south. The relentless sun softened its bite, coaxing life from the parched earth. Prickly pear burst into vivid yellow blooms, clumps of purple lupine and scarlet penstemon dotted the clearings, and wild grasses greened the valleys in sweeping waves. Creeks swollen with snowmelt from higher peaks sang over rocks, carrying the fresh scent of thawing soil, and renewal down to the thorn mine, now the thriving heart of the frontier sanctuary. The once forsaken shaft stood transformed, its entrance framed by a sturdy wooden arch bearing the carved sign that swayed gently in the breeze, welcoming all who sought respite from the frontier's unyielding trials. Colt Remington leaned against the corral fence one golden morning, his tall frame relaxed in the warming light, Stetson tipped back on his dark wavy hair as he surveyed the bustling clearing with quiet satisfaction. His faded blue shirt was open at the collar, sleeves rolled to reveal forearms tanned and scarred from honest labor. Leather chaps traded for practical denim now that the sanctuary demanded more builder than rider. Those piercing brown eyes, once restless with the wanderlust of open trails, now held a steady warmth, crinkling at the corners with his trademark roguish smile as he watched children chase Blaze through patches of blooming wildflowers. The big red sheepdog romped with boundless energy, his powerful build weaving playfully among the young ones, tongue lolling and tail wagging like a banner of joy. Guardian turned playmate in this haven of second chances. The sanctuary pulsed with life, corrals filled with healthy horses munching fresh graze, gardens bursting with early greens tended by Nora Thorne's capable hands, the ring of Silas Reed's hammer at the forge shaping tools for newcomers. Smoke curled lazily from cook fires where settlers shared meals, voices rising in laughter and song, tales of hard rides swapped with gratitude for a safe berth. Miners nursed old injuries in the shade, cowpokes mended gear while planning new starts, and families rebuilt spirits shattered by the wild's cruelties. Colt scratched his journal absent-mindedly that evening, penning thoughts by lantern light in the expanded main chamber, now a warm common room with tables, bunks, and walls adorned with maps and children's drawings. He reflected on the journey, from solitary drifter chasing solitude after loss, to guardian of a growing community born from buried secrets. The artifacts remain sealed below, a legacy preserved rather than plundered, their value funding this refuge for the downtrodden. Marshal Wade Colton rode up one crisp afternoon, his burly frame dismounting with familiar ease, beard trimmed neat and badge gleaming. He carried an official envelope from the territorial office, papers recognizing the frontier sanctuary as a chartered haven, with grants for expansion and protection under law. "You've earned this, Remington," Wade rumbled, clapping Colt on the shoulder with a broad grin. "Turned a place of ghosts into hope for folks the world forgot." Colt accepted with a nod, that charismatic smile flashing genuine. "Couldn't have held the line without good men like you, Marshal." As dusk painted the peaks in rose and gold, the community gathered around the large fire pit outside the entrance, a ritual that bound them closer each night. Silas strummed his guitar softly, Nora ladled stew into tin bowls. Children nestled close to parents, while elders puffed pipes and shared wisdom. Wade joined the circle, passing a flask of whiskey, his booming laugh mingling with the crackle of flames. Nora sat beside Colt, her practical braid loosened in the firelight, green eyes reflective. "Ever think of riding on again?" she asked quietly, voice carrying the frontier's straightforward warmth. Colt gazed into the flames, then at the faces around him. Silas's quiet determination, Wade's steadfast loyalty. The hopeful eyes of newcomers finding footing. Blaze rested his heavy head on Colt's knee, dark eyes content. "Used to reckon peace was in the next horizon," Colt replied, drawl soft and thoughtful. "Turns out it's right here, building something that lasts." She smiled faintly, the group falling into easy silence as stars emerged overhead, vast and eternal. Later, alone at the entrance overlooking the blooming desert, Colt tipped his Stetson back and whispered to Blaze, "We didn't buy a mine, partner. We found a reason to stay." The dog barked once, a joyful sound echoing into the night, tail thumping against the earth. Below, the land flowered in quiet triumph, symbol of rebirth and the enduring spirit of the wild frontier, where one man's discovery had forged a legacy of hope, loyalty, and unbreakable bonds. In the end, Colt Remington's story reminds us that miracles don't always thunder from the heavens like a summer storm across the open range. Sometimes they rise quietly from the dust of our hardest trails, from the hidden places we never meant to uncover, where faith, loyalty, and a steadfast heart turn buried sorrow into blooming hope. Just as a lone cowboy and his faithful dog found treasure not in gold alone, but in the lives they lifted and the home they built for the weary, so too does the good Lord work in our everyday lives. He takes our broken trails, our lost herds, our lonely nights under endless stars, and weaves them into something greater, a sanctuary of grace for others, if only we have the courage to stay, to give, and to trust His hand guiding the reins. If this tale of redemption and quiet miracles has stirred your soul, share it with someone riding a hard road today. Leave a comment below about the miracle you've seen in your own life, big or small. Subscribe to Walk This Trail with us for more stories of faith, bravery, and the unbreakable bonds that carry us through. Type Amen in the comments if you believe the Lord still plants miracles in the most unexpected places. May God bless and keep every soul watching this with hope, strength, and His everlasting peace. Amen.